Bruno Tertrais finds himself in the favored French position, i.e. at the center of the panel, flanked by Germany and by France and by Great Britain. Bruno Tertrais. What? Not outflanked, just flanked. But very much at the core. Bruno, the French perspectives, please.
My friend Constance mentioned, interestingly, Germany's first-order priorities as protecting the EU and protecting NATO. I was thinking, does that capture the French view? And I would say probably not, in the sense that we do share the most important interest here, that is protecting the EU as first-order interest. That's something absolutely fundamental in both France and Germany, to the same extent. Would the French be comfortable in saying we need to protect NATO as a first-order interest as much as we need to protect the EU? Probably not. And that's a slight difference, maybe a slight difference of perspective. But since, Asle, you appropriately reminded me that I'm sitting between Germany and the UK, I invite all of us to take a step back in these times of uncertainties and trouble and say, look, Germany, the UK, and France, even today, continue to share the same fundamental interests, the same view of Russia as a challenge, despite our differences, the same view of jihadi terrorism as a first-order threat. And, I encourage us, despite everything that's happening, Brexit, Trump, and all that, blah, 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 to take a step back and say, hey, this isn't so bad. The three biggest, most important, whatever you want to call them, European countries have the same fundamental security outlook, and that's an acquis. That's something important. I think it's solid. I don't think that it can significantly change. I don't see any of our three countries strongly diverging for that commonality of views anytime soon. Doesn't mean we don't have differences on how to deal with Russia, how to deal with terrorism, etc. But I think this is important, and I think we should take it as a starting point of the conversation. A few words about Brexit, and again, since I'm sitting next to my friend Constance, I would say I'm going to use a German word and say there was no Schadenfreude in France about Brexit. By and large, the vast majority of the French political elite and intellectual elite saw it as a catastrophe, or not as a blessing in any case, and not something, well, there was a little bit of I told you so, etc. But even for those who've always been skeptical about the UK role in the EU, even they realize that because of the era of uncertainties it opens, because of the risks that it creates a more inward-looking and a weaker UK, that's bad news in any case. Well, there was actually a little bit of "we told you so" in the sense that, but I'll get back to. I think the "we told you so" thing is more on the Trump factor. Well, I'll get back to in a second. What we want, in any case, is for UK security to be as tightly coupled to EU security as possible. But here's a dilemma. Here's a dilemma for France and also for other European countries, as well as for some in the EU institutions. It is true that most of the French want, that the main message is you can't have your cake and eat it. And we don't want to make things easy for you, not because it's you, but because the whole process is at stake, and whatever we create, whatever ad hoc model we create for the UK, if we were to create an ad hoc model that makes things easier for everybody, could potentially be a template for the next EU member to be tempted to leave the UK. So that's a dilemma that not only the French, by the way, but many in the EU face when we look at what kind of exit strategy we want for the UK. Now, apart from that, there's also a fundamental bilateral, purely bilateral relation in the Paris-London dynamics, which is the UK has been our main cooperation and operations partner since the early 90s on defense and security. And this has happened mostly, though not only, on the bilateral basis. So in a sense, we're quite confident that Brexit will not make that disappear. We see no reason why, for instance, the acquis of the Lancaster House treaties that we signed in 2010, which took our bilateral cooperation one step further, would suddenly be broken. But again, we are also aware that there are forces that nobody really controls here, neither France nor Germany, not even the UK. So we're cautiously optimistic about what Brexit will mean for French security. Now, the Trump factor. Well, let me tackle three questions. How does the Trump administration see ISIS and the jihadi threat? Is that the first order challenge? Yes. So we're confident with that. And we're confident that French-American security and defense cooperation will be unaffected as long as this is the case. There may be a question mark on how to fight ISIS and how the US positions itself in Syria and vis Russia, etc. Second question mark, the future of the EU. Well, if it is confirmed that the message from Washington now is we don't want a strong and united EU, or we're not ready to encourage it, at least, to say the least, because as we all know, the views of the potential US ambassador to the EU are stronger than that, then that's a problem. Then there's the third question mark, which is the future of NATO. And that's currently actually a topic of debate in French security circles. If you take the famous Trump sentence, some would acknowledge the first part, others would acknowledge the second one. NATO is obsolete, or NATO is important. Because he said, everybody keeps repeating that he said NATO was obsolete, but that in that same sentence he also said, but NATO is important. So some of us in French focus on the first part of the sentence, and others focus on the second part. And that's still a big question mark. So that's the third question mark. Enough for the question, enough for the answers. There is, from the French standpoint, there is I hate to call it a silver lining, but hey, we have to use the silver lining we find these days. The silver lining of Brexit plus Trump, so to say, is that there is an emerging consensus for a stronger and more independent EU in defense and security. It's important because this goes beyond our political disagreements on how to manage Russia, for instance. If I can illustrate this with the positions of the main candidates, on Russia, clearly you have a Le Pen and Fillon view, and then you have, at the risk of simplification, you have a Macron and Hamon view. But all of these, the three mainstream candidates, although unfortunately I think we have to consider Le Pen as mainstream these days, but that's a political analysis question. Macron, Fillon, and Hamon all support a stronger, more independent, more autonomous EU because of Brexit and Trump. So that's a small silver lining. By the way, there's also another consensual point now. It's on the 2%. It's interesting because France has never been very keen on taking very seriously the NATO, how can I put it, justifying our own defense expenditure but what NATO collectively wants has never been a very strong argument in the French political debate. However, interestingly, the 2% has been adopted by all the main candidates, that the devil is in the details. It's about how you reach 2%, exactly what's in the 2%, when do you get to the 2%, etc. But still, I think I find it quite remarkable. It is. I have to say, even though that's, I'm going to say I'm going to sound very French, but you know, Constance, how French I sound anyway.
That's a try.
Yeah. What's been happening sort of validates the traditional French narrative. We've always told you so. I'm caricaturing what I think is the French caricature. I'm caricaturing myself. We've always told you that the UK would choose Washington over Europe. We've always told you that the Americans could not be relied upon forever. And by the way, we don't even blame them. It's the mere fact that the very notion of an outside protector for Europe is something that can never be 100% reliable. Okay, I'm not saying that I personally subscribe to this. I don't subscribe to the description of the narrative that I just did. Maybe just a little bit, but not to the extent that I did. But that's clearly the traditional French narrative. No, I don't. You know. We're going to have another dinner conversation or whatever.
I'm not even saying anything.
Well, you're not, but I know you. I know you. You know me. See, France and Germany, we're like an old couple. France and Germany, we love it.
And for the record, I disagree with you on some points, but we can do that in
I know
discussion.
you do. It wouldn't be fun if there was not disagreement. But I think it's important to know that the French do feel, even though they don't necessarily say it, they do feel vindicated in a sense in their traditional narrative. That doesn't mean, again, no Schadenfreude, doesn't make us happy, doesn't make them happy. But if they feel that it's more or less the right time to do things that we've always, rightly or wrongly, wanted to do. A classic example, I'll finish with that. A classic example is the operational headquarters for EU operations, which is something that there's never been consensual, in particular because of British opposition. I say, hey, now is the right time. So to sum up, from the French point of view, I would say there's a convergence of factors that can transform into some form of silver lining for Europe. I think I'll stop here. No, I've seen Ursula telling me to. Yep? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruno. That was lovely.